There are quiet moments when you realize how little space you actually take up in the room that's supposed to feel like home. For me, that moment came at Christmas dinner. I walked into my parents' old townhouse telling myself, maybe this year would be different. Maybe I wouldn't feel like an afterthought. I've spent years pretending the distance didn't hurt, but what happened that night didn't just confirm it. A week later, it changed everything. The days leading up to Christmas always stirs something in me. Not excitement exactly, more like a fragile kind of hope. The kind you don't say out loud because you're afraid it will sound naive. I told myself this year could feel different. Families surprise you sometimes. People grow. Distance can shrink if you give it enough time. So, I decided to do my part, even if I was the only one trying. I spent the afternoon wrapping simple gifts at my kitchen table. Nothing extravagant. A book for Brandon that I'd chosen after remembering a conversation we'd had months earlier. A skincare set for Lydia, something I thought she'd genuinely use. Small things, but I wrapped them carefully, smoothing each fold of paper, tying each ribbon with more intention than the items probably deserved. I wrote out tags by hand. I told myself that effort mattered, that maybe care could set a tone. When I finally arrived at my parents' old townhouse, the air already felt familiar. Not hostile, just settled, fixed in a shape that didn't quite include me. Mom greeted me at the door with a polite smile. It flickered on and off so quickly I almost wondered if I'd imagined it. She took the reusable bag from my hands and placed it at the far end of the table without opening it, without asking what was inside. Efficient, practical. Conversation wasn't necessary. Dad nodded at me from across the living room without standing up. He didn't look unkind. He just didn't shift his focus long enough for it to matter. That small distance tightened something in my chest the same way it always had. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, predictable. I told myself not to take it personally. The hallway echoed a few minutes later when Brandon arrived. He walked in with the kind of energy that suggested the holiday revolved around him. He greeted our parents warmly, voice louder, shoulders relaxed. When he turned to me, his politeness felt measured, controlled, almost like he was being generous by offering it. I handed him the book I'd wrapped, mentioning that I'd remembered our earlier conversation. He accepted it with a neutral murmur. No curiosity, no acknowledgement of the memory attached to it. Just a quick glance before setting it aside. I felt a flicker of embarrassment for having held on to that detail for so long. Then Lydia's voice floated in from the kitchen doorway before she fully stepped inside. Her first comment wasn't a greeting. It was an observation how she thought I might have arrived earlier to help. The way she said it made it clear she hadn't actually expected me to be capable of contributing much anyway. I let it pass. Responding would only give her something to work with. I handed her the skincare set, explaining briefly that I'd thought of her when I saw it. She looked at it just long enough to ask if I'd included a gift receipt. Her tone carried a thin edge she didn't bother hiding. I nodded. Of course I had. Despite the coldness that followed their entrances, I stayed busy. I adjusted napkins, straightened utensils, filled water glasses. The small tasks gave my hands somewhere to go while my thoughts tried to steady themselves. The townhouse carried memories of other holidays, years when I'd convinced myself things were improving. I avoided lingering there. Nostalgia has a way of making the present hurt more. As I worked, I overheard Mom and Dad discussing plans, travel schedules, upcoming events. None of it included me. Their voices folded easily around each other, seamless and aligned. I reminded myself again not to read into it. Not every exclusion is intentional, I told myself. Sometimes people just forget. Brandon passed by as I placed the last fork on the table. He commented that I always choose the simplest gifts every year. He smiled slightly when he said it, but not in a friendly way. Lydia joined him, adding that she hoped I hadn't overextended myself with whatever I'd brought. Neither of them raised their voices. They didn't need to. The weight of the remarks settled anyway. I focused on breathing, on staying calm. Rising to it would only confirm whatever assumptions they already held about me. So I kept adjusting plates that didn't need adjusting. I tried to suggest small ideas about dinner, how we could arrange things when we should sit down, but my words slipped into the room without landing anywhere. No one picked them up. I found myself nodding along to conversations about spring travel plans and traditions I wasn't included in. Participating felt easier than pointing out the obvious. The silence after my earlier comments had already discouraged me enough. Still, I held on. There's a part of me they've never quite managed to extinguish. The part that believes one meaningful moment could shift everything. That one unexpected kindness might soften the edges between us. As I finally sat at the edge of the living room, waiting for dinner to begin, I told myself the evening wasn't over yet. The holiday spirit might still surprise me. Maybe the meal would loosen something. Maybe a conversation would open. I wasn't ready to let go of that possibility just yet. By the time we sat down for dinner, the room had settled into something that felt rehearsed. Not intentionally rehearsed, maybe, but familiar, predictable, like everyone knew their part. I took my seat after, helping Mom carry the last few dishes to the table. The long dining table stretched between us, polished and orderly, as if the evening required a certain level of ceremony. I folded my hands in my lap for a moment, steadying my breathing. I reminded myself that I had come here hoping for more than just a place setting at the edge. Conversation began almost immediately, moving quickly around the table. It flowed from Mom to Brandon, from Lydia to Dad, looping easily between them. Whenever I tried to add something, a small comment about the recipe, a thought about a shared memory, it slipped into the space between words and dissolved. No one interrupted me. They just didn't continue the thread. So I focused on my plate. Brandon complimented Mom on the ham, and she brightened in a way I had never quite managed to inspire. Lydia began talking about her spring travel plans, explaining destinations and timelines in detail. Dad leaned in, listening carefully, asking follow-up questions. Their attention stayed with her as if everything she said carried substance. Under the table, I clasped my hands together to keep them still. Reacting would only deepen the divide. I had learned that much. Dinner moved forward in that same rhythm. Laughter at one end of the table, shared glances between the three of them inside references I didn't recognize. I nodded when appropriate. I smiled when expected. I kept my voice measured. When the plates were finally cleared, Mom stood and announced it was time for gifts. My pulse shifted slightly. Gift exchanges had always carried their own quiet discomfort, but I told myself not to assume anything. Not yet. She handed Brandon a large envelope first. The smile she gave him felt almost performative, bright, deliberate. He opened it slowly as if aware that prolonging the moment would increase the impact. Inside was a complete vacation package to Hawaii. Flight confirmations, accommodation bookings, planned activities printed neatly on glossy paper. Everything arranged with intention and care. He held the documents up so everyone could see. The admiration in the room was immediate and unfiltered. Mom looked proud. Dad nodded approvingly. Lydia leaned closer to examine the details. I offered a polite smile. Mom then turned to Lydia and handed her a small velvet box. Lydia's confidence seemed to rise before she even opened it. She lifted the lid with steady hands. A brand new Rolex rested inside its original price tag, tucked discreetly beneath the cushion. The value wasn't hidden. If anything, it felt like part of the message. The room shifted again, approval, satisfaction, a lingering focus on Lydia's reaction. She leaned back slightly as Dad told her the watch suited her. The attention stayed on her long enough that it created a pause before anyone acknowledged there was one gift left. Finally, Mom reached for a small paper bag with thin handles. The way she placed it in front of me felt different. There was no anticipation in her expression, no shared glance with Dad. Just a quiet, efficient motion as though completing a checklist. I picked it up without rushing. Part of me had already braced for something modest. I told myself it didn't matter. Gifts weren't the point. Presence was. Inside the bag sat a single $2 lottery ticket. It was slightly bent at one corner. No note, no card, no explanation. Just the ticket. Before I could say anything, Dad looked at me with a neutral expression and said, "Good luck." That was it. The words didn't carry warmth or humor. They landed with a finality that told me more than any elaborate explanation could have. The silence that followed felt heavier than the laughter that had filled the room moments earlier. I nodded. I forced a small smile. Showing hurt would only magnify the humiliation. Lydia glanced at me briefly as if waiting for some kind of reaction she could interpret. Brandon had already returned his attention to the travel documents in his hands. I folded the lottery ticket carefully and slipped it into my coat pocket. The motion wasn't about preserving the paper. It was about preserving whatever dignity I still felt I had. Conversation resumed almost immediately. They began discussing restaurant reservations in Hawaii, travel itineraries, future holidays. None of it paused to include me. My gift required no follow-up questions, no commentary, no acknowledgement beyond those 2 words. Good luck. I sat there for a few minutes longer, listening to their voices blend together. The sound pressed against my chest in a way that felt familiar but sharper. I realized staying any longer would only deepen the feeling settling in my stomach. I pushed my chair back slowly, careful not to draw attention. No one looked up. Mom glanced in my direction briefly, but she didn't ask where I was going. Dad continued gesturing toward Brandon's envelope, explaining something about excursions. Lydia laughed at something Brandon said. I gathered my coat and offered a quiet goodbye. The words dissolved into the room without altering its rhythm. No one paused. No one stood. The conversation carried on exactly as it had before. For a moment, I hesitated near the doorway. I don't know what I expected. A call after me, a question, even a casual acknowledgement. Nothing came. So I opened the door and stepped outside. The cold air wrapped around me immediately, sharp and steady. It felt more honest than anything inside had. The sound of their laughter drifted faintly through the closed door, muffled but continuous. I walked down the steps of the townhouse slowly. The night was quiet, the street still, and for the first time since arriving, I stopped trying to manage my expression. I let my shoulders drop. I let the tightness in my chest settle where it had been pressing all evening. There are moments when you don't need anyone to say the words out loud. You just know. Standing there in the cold, I finally allowed myself to feel the weight of what I had tried so hard to ignore. A week passed after Christmas, and the sharpness of that night dulled into something quieter, but it didn't disappear. It followed me to work. It lingered in the background of small routines. I told myself I was fine. I always told myself that. One evening, after a long day that felt heavier than usual, I stopped at the small convenience store near my apartment. I wasn't looking for anything meaningful. I just needed a drink, a pause, a few minutes where no one expected anything from me. The fluorescent lights inside hummed softly. I walked past the aisles without really seeing them until I reached the counter. That's when I noticed the row of lottery tickets displayed behind the glass. For a moment, I almost smiled at the irony. Dad's voice. Good luck flickered through my mind. I felt a familiar sting, but it didn't land the same way this time. Instead of letting the bitterness settle, I stood there a little longer than necessary. Then, almost without overthinking it, I asked for one. Not because I believed in luck. Not because I expected anything to come from it. If I'm honest, I think I just wanted something that was mine. A choice I made for myself. Not a gesture handed to me without care. The clerk handed me the ticket. I paid with my card. The transaction was ordinary, unremarkable. I slipped the ticket into my purse and walked home without giving it another thought. It wasn't until the next evening that I saw it again. I was sorting through mail at my kitchen counter, moving envelopes into small piles, when the ticket slid out from beneath my planner. I stared at it for a second, almost forgetting what it was. I picked up my phone and pulled up the winning numbers online with no expectation at all. I assumed I'd glance at them, confirm the obvious, and move on. I read the first number. It matched. A small flicker of surprise passed through me, but I told myself that meant nothing. One number is nothing. I read the second. It matched too. My breathing slowed without me meaning for it to. The room felt suddenly still, like the air had thickened around me. Third number, match. Fourth, fifth. Each one aligned with a precision that felt almost unreal. I checked again. Slowly, carefully. I compared the numbers one by one, tracing them with my finger as if they might shift if I looked too quickly. They didn't. The final confirmation sat there on the screen in plain text. The grand prize, $15 million. I didn't jump up. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just sat down at my kitchen table and stared at the ticket in my hand. The realization didn't hit all at once. It spread gradually like warmth moving through a room that had been cold for a long time. My heart beat steadily, not wildly. I read the numbers aloud softly just to hear them exist outside my own head. They didn't change. I checked the website again, then a second source, then a third. Still the same. $15 million. It felt enormous and distant at the same time. Too large to grasp fully. Too significant to react to carelessly. My first instinct wasn't celebration, it was protection. I stood, walked to my desk, and placed the ticket inside a folder. Then I locked it inside a drawer. The motion was deliberate, slow, grounded. This wasn't something to wave around, not something to speak into existence too quickly. It needed quiet. It needed space. The next morning, I contacted the state lottery office. My voice stayed steady as I explained why I was calling. The representative walked me through the verification process with calm professionalism, outlining each step I would need to follow. I listened carefully, took notes, confirmed details. There was paperwork, identification requirements, a scheduled appointment to formally validate the claim. Every instruction felt procedural structured. That structure helped. It kept me anchored. Over the next few days, I followed each step exactly as directed. I secured the necessary documents. I confirmed the ticket's legitimacy in person. I asked questions when I needed clarification. Each confirmation solidified what still felt surreal. And through all of it, I told no one. Not my parents, not Brandon, not Lydia. They hadn't reached out. Since Christmas night, the silence between us stretched on uninterrupted. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed they assumed everything had returned to normal. I knew they thought the $2 ticket they'd given me had gone home in my coat pocket. And technically it had. But the ticket that mattered, the one that changed everything, was different. It had been chosen by me, paid for by me, claimed by me. I kept that truth close. In the evenings, I would sit in my apartment and let the reality settle slowly, carefully. The secrecy felt heavy at times, but it was also empowering. For once, I held something that belonged entirely to me. No shared ownership, no implied obligation, just mine. And while my family moved through their days, unaware, I sat quietly, with a truth that had the power to reshape my life. 3 days after I officially confirmed the prize, my phone lit up with a message from Mom. Her name on the screen felt ordinary at first. What wasn't ordinary was the tone. She asked if I had checked the lottery ticket they'd given me at Christmas. The message was unusually enthusiastic, almost breathless. She mentioned a rumor circulating online that someone in our region had won. She added a smiley face at the end as if the whole thing were light-hearted speculation. I stared at the screen for a long moment. They hadn't contacted me once since I left their townhouse. Not to ask if I got home safely. Not to follow up on the holiday. And now, suddenly, there was interest. I replied briefly. I said I'd been busy. The next morning, Lydia's message arrived. Her tone was different, less casual, more pointed. She asked whether I had checked the numbers yet. Then she added that it would be amazing for the family if the winning ticket happened to be the one they gave me. For the family. The phrasing lingered. Shortly after Brandon sent his own message, his wording was careful but unmistakable. He wrote about how incredible it would be if we had something like that to share. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask what I planned to do. He simply spoke as though the outcome already belonged to all of them. The messages continued throughout the day. Mom followed up asking if I had turned the ticket in yet. Dad wanted to know whether I had looked into the claim process. Lydia hinted that keeping something like that to myself would feel selfish after everything they'd done. Brandon's tone sharpened the most. He wrote that the right thing would be to divide the money evenly. He said that since the ticket had been a gift, The prize should naturally benefit the whole family. Naturally. I read each message slowly, noticing how the curiosity had shifted into assumption. Then assumption into expectation. And expectation into pressure. They were no longer wondering whether I had won. They were planning what to do with it. That afternoon, a notification popped up from social media. Brandon had posted something vague but deliberate about loyalty within families, about how true character shows when unexpected blessings arrive. The comments beneath it were sympathetic, supportive, people agreeing that family should always come first. He never mentioned my name. He didn't need to. Anyone who knew us would understand the implication. It felt calculated, as if he was shaping the narrative publicly before I had even spoken privately. My phone rang while I was still reading the comments. It was Mom. Her voice trembled the moment I answered. She told me she hadn't slept. She said she'd been thinking about how this situation could still be handled the right way. She spoke about the family deserving relief after years of stress, as though my own struggles hadn't existed alongside theirs. Her tone moved between pleading and subtle guilt. She reminded me of sacrifices, of support, of how much they had always wanted the best for me. The implication hovered beneath every word. This was an opportunity for me to finally give something back. I listened quietly, and for the first time, something inside me shifted. I realized they weren't speaking to me as a daughter or sister. They were speaking to me as a resource, as a solution, as a financial extension of themselves. When the call ended, Dad's message appeared. His approach was colder, more direct. He wrote that handling a large sum improperly could create problems, that sharing it would prevent unnecessary tension. He didn't threaten anything outright, but the undertone was clear. Yield. By the end of the day, my phone felt heavier in my hand. Each vibration carried more insistence than the last. They all believed the winning ticket was the one they had handed me so casually. None of them paused to consider another possibility. None of them asked gently. They simply moved forward with the version of events that benefited them most. And as I read through the thread again, I felt something steady rise beneath the tension. Clarity. The winning ticket wasn't theirs. It had never been theirs. It wasn't the slightly bent $2 ticket placed in a paper bag without a card. It was the one I had chosen myself, the one I had paid for, the one I had checked alone at my kitchen table. I opened the family group thread and began typing. I didn't attack. I didn't accuse. I didn't match their tone. I wrote that the winning ticket was not the one they had given me on Christmas night. I explained that the prize came from a ticket I had purchased independently at a convenience store near my home. I kept the message simple, factual, clean. No embellishment, no defensiveness. Then I pressed send. The room around me felt very quiet. For the first time since the rumors began, I wasn't reacting to their expectations. I was stating the truth. The courtroom felt smaller than Aubrey expected. Not physically, the ceilings were high, the walls paneled in pale wood, but emotionally. The air seemed tight with anticipation, charged by the presence of her family. Seated on the opposite side of the aisle, they did not look at her when she entered. Brandon's posture was rigid, Lydia's chin tilted upward. Her mother's expression was strained but composed. Her father stared ahead, hands folded. They had hired an aggressive attorney, just as the script described. His presence announced itself before he spoke, Sharp suit-clip movements, a tone that carried across the room, even in preliminary exchanges. He organized papers with deliberate precision, occasionally leaning toward Brandon to murmur something brief and confident. Aubrey sat beside her attorney, Marcus Hale. Marcus did not match the theatrical energy of opposing counsel. His manner was steady measured. When he greeted her that morning, his voice had been calm, grounded. He had reviewed the evidence again, not because it was weak, but because he believed in preparation as reassurance. He had reminded her of what they had: documentation, timestamp, subjective proof. The contrast between the two tables was visible even before proceedings began. When the judge entered the room, Rose. The case was called. Her family's attorney stood first. He framed the narrative as betrayal. The argument was direct. The lottery ticket had been a Christmas gift. It had been given in the parents' townhouse. Therefore, the winnings in his view were shared property, or at minimum morally obligated to be distributed among the family. He emphasized intention. He referenced tradition. He implied bad faith. Throughout his presentation, Aubrey kept her expression neutral. She did not look toward her family. She focused on the bench. When it was Marcus's turn, he did not match the volume or force of the prior argument. He simply began laying out facts. He submitted the time-stamped receipt from the convenience store. The date and time were clear. It was not Christmas Day. It was the following day after she had left the townhouse. He entered the store's security footage into evidence. The screen displayed grainy but unmistakable images, Aubrey standing alone at the counter. She removed cash from her wallet. The clerk scanned the ticket. The timestamp in the corner aligned precisely with the receipt. There was no one with her, no family member present, no indication that this ticket had been part of the earlier exchange. The store clerk was called to testify. He spoke plainly. He remembered her, not because she was dramatic or emotional, but because the following day she had returned to confirm the win. He confirmed that she had purchased the ticket herself. He identified the time-stamped receipt. He described the transaction: one ticket paid in cash. Opposing counsel attempted to suggest confusion, but the clerk remained steady. He pointed out that lottery terminals log every sale electronically. The system matched the receipt. The footage matched the system. Marcus then presented documentation from the lottery office. The claim had been filed under her name. The validation process confirmed the ticket's serial number corresponded to the purchase recorded at that specific time. Objective, recorded, verifiable. The judge began asking questions. To the family's attorney, was there any documentation that the Christmas gift ticket, the $2 one her father handed her, was the winning ticket? Any serial number record? Any physical proof that it matched the winning claim? There was none. Was there evidence that the winning ticket had been present in the townhouse? Any witness who saw her leave with a confirmed winning ticket from that evening? There was not. The questions continued careful and methodical. Each answer from the opposing side rested on assumption rather than documentation, intention rather than proof. When asked directly whether they could produce the original Christmas gift ticket, there was a pause. The attorney admitted they could not. It had not been retained. Across the aisle, her mother's composure faltered slightly. Brandon shifted in his seat. Lydia's jaw tightened. Marcus did not need to dramatize the contrast. It was visible on its own. On one side, accusation entitlement narrative. On the other, receipt footage testimony timestamps. When Aubrey was briefly questioned, her responses were simple. Yes, she received a lottery ticket as a gift. No, it was not a winner. Yes, she later stopped at a convenience store. Yes, she purchased a ticket herself. Yes, the winning ticket was that purchase. She did not embellish. She did not argue. The courtroom felt still as the judge reviewed the materials once more. The ruling was delivered without spectacle. The court found no evidence supporting the family's claim. The documentation clearly demonstrated that the winning ticket had been independently purchased by Aubrey. The arguments presented by the plaintiffs relied on assumption and lacked proof. As such, the case was dismissed in full. A quiet shift moved through the room. Not loud, not dramatic, just the subtle release of held breath. Her family's attorney gathered his papers quickly. Brandon avoided looking in her direction. Lydia stood abruptly. Her mother remained seated for a moment longer, then rose slowly. Her father did not meet her eyes. Aubrey did not react outwardly. She sat still as Marcus placed a reassuring hand over the file in front of her, closing it with a calm finality. Outside the courtroom, the hallway felt wider than the room they had just left. Marcus turned to her. "You handled that well," he said evenly. "It takes strength to let documentation speak for you." She nodded. The word strength felt unfamiliar in this context. She had not felt powerful inside the courtroom. She had felt steady, grounded, certain of what was true. "That was yours?" he added quietly. "Not the money, though, that was implied. The evidence, the truth, the ownership of her decision." She understood. There was no triumph in the moment, no sense of victory over them, only clarity. The case was over. The record was clear. The court had affirmed what she had known from the beginning. The winning ticket had been hers, purchased, quietly, secured, responsibly, claimed in her name. As her family disappeared down the opposite end of the corridor, Aubrey did not call after them. She did not attempt reconciliation. The legal resolution had drawn a boundary more clearly than any argument could. Marcus offered to walk her to the elevator. She accepted. The doors closed softly. For the first time since rumors had begun circulating, since messages had escalated and accusations had been filed, there was no pressure waiting in her phone, no demand for explanation, only the quiet confirmation of documented truth. When the elevator reached the ground floor and the doors opened, Marcus stepped aside to let her exit first. "You did exactly what you needed to do," he said. She paused briefly, then nodded again. Outside the courthouse, the air was cool and steady. The noise of the street carried on as usual, unaffected by the verdict that had just reshaped her relationship with her family. The case had been dismissed fully in her favor, and for the first time since Christmas night, Aubrey felt the absence of accusation pressing against her ribs, replaced by something steadier. Not celebration, not relief alone, but ownership. The ruling did not end with applause or spectacle. It ended with a quiet shift, subtle at first, then unmistakable. In the days that followed, the community began to recalibrate. Neighbors who had once accepted her parents' version of events without question started asking their own. The story had traveled quickly when the lawsuit was filed. It traveled faster once it was dismissed. Documentation has a way of settling rumors. The public record was clear there had been no shared ticket, no deception, no withheld gift, only a claim built on assumption. Her mother and father felt the difference almost immediately. Invitations slowed. Conversations at church grew shorter, more careful. Where there had once been sympathetic murmurs about family betrayal, there were now polite nods and changed subjects. People did not confront them directly. They did something quieter. They stepped back. It wasn't cruelty, it was distance. Brandon's workplace responded in its own way. The promotion he had been anticipating won, he had already spoken about as though it were secured quietly, moved to another candidate. Officially, the decision had nothing to do with the lawsuit. Unofficially, reputation mattered. Public disputes, especially those that ended in dismissal, cast long shadows. His social media posts, once filled with thinly veiled commentary about loyalty and fairness, disappeared one by one. The confidence he had projected began to look brittle. Lydia's fallout was more immediate. The curated circle she had cultivated online thrived on perception, on poise image, and moral certainty. When screenshots of her accusatory posts circulated beside summaries of the court's findings, the tone around her shifted. Comments grew sharper. Invitations to collaborate slowed. The certainty in her voice softened. None of it was explosive, it was erosion. Aubrey watched from a distance she did not have to enforce loudly. She simply stopped responding. There were no celebratory posts from her, no statements reclaiming narrative. She did not correct every whisper. She did not broadcast the verdict. She allowed the facts to exist without embellishment. Revenge would have required proximity. Instead, she chose space. Within a month, she moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't grand, and it wasn't meant to be. The space felt intentional, clean lines, light through the windows in the early morning, a kitchen, just large enough for what she needed. It was hers in a way the townhouse had never been. The first night there, she unpacked slowly. No audience, no commentary. Just the quiet placement of objects on shelves. The steady rhythm of creating a life that did not depend on approval. Julia came by with takeout and a folded blanket as a housewarming gift. She did not ask for details Aubrey hadn't offered. She did not analyze the family's behavior or speculate about what might happen next. She sat cross-legged on the floor and talked about ordinary things. Work, movies, plans for the spring, steady support. Marcus checked in too, not as her attorney anymore, but as someone who understood what it meant to close a chapter without theatrics. He reminded her once that legal victories rarely feel triumphant. They feel quiet, final. She found comfort in that framing. The absence of her family did not feel like freedom at first. It felt like grief. There were moments when she reached for her phone, instinctively expecting a message that would not come. Moments when she replayed Christmas dinner in her mind, the ceremony of it, the careful choreography of exclusion. The small humiliations she had once minimized now sat clearly in memory. She allowed herself to grieve, not just what had happened, but what had never existed. The version of family she had kept hoping might soften. That hope had sustained her for years. It had shaped her careful gift, wrapping her polite smiles, her restraint. It had kept her waiting for acknowledgement, for fairness, for remorse. At some point, she understood she was no longer waiting. Her mother did call once, weeks later. The tone was subdued, searching for neutral ground. Aubrey listened. She did not argue. She did not revisit the case. When the conversation drifted toward implication, toward suggestions that things got out of hand, Aubrey did not fill in the silence. Boundaries, she realized, did not require anger. They required consistency. After the call ended, she did not feel vindicated. She felt clear. She stopped monitoring Brandon's career updates. She muted Lydia's accounts. She declined invitations that would place her back in rooms where explanations might be demanded. Distance became less of a defensive act and more of a standard. In the quiet of her apartment, independence took on practical meaning. Bills paid on time, groceries chosen without commentary, evenings structured by preference rather than obligation. Self-worth, she learned, was not loud. It did not arrive with a courtroom ruling or a bank balance. It emerged in small, repeated decisions to protect her peace, to decline manipulation, to stop negotiating for basic respect. The grief did not vanish. It changed shape. Some nights she still thought about the townhouse, the warmth of the lights in December, the way conversation had flowed around her as though she were a placeholder rather than a participant. But the memory no longer tightened her chest. It clarified her understanding. She had not been a resource. She had been a person waiting to be treated like one. The day she finalized her lease, she stood in the empty apartment before her furniture arrived. The quiet was complete, unshared. Walking away had not felt dramatic when she did it. It had felt necessary. Only later did she recognize it for what it was. Not the lawsuit, not the money, not even the verdict. Leaving without revenge. Choosing distance without spectacle. Releasing the expectation of remorse that had been her first real act of strength. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't proving you're right. It's deciding you deserve better. Self-worth grows quietly when you stop begging for respect and start honoring your own boundaries. Choosing yourself can feel lonely at first, but it's often where real strength begins. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to hear what it stirred up for you. And if you'd like to keep sharing these moments together, stay close.